and welcome to One to Grow On, a show where we dig into questions about agriculture and try to understand how food production impacts us and our world. My name is Hallie Casey, and I studied and currently work in agriculture.
And I'm Chris Casey, Hallie's dad. Each episode, we pick an area of agriculture or food production to discuss. And this week, we are talking about new farmers with Marcus Coleman.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. It's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to meet you.
Oh, good. No, it's, you guys are over in Texas, correct?
Yes, sir.
I think it was supposed to be last week. LSU was supposed to be playing University of Texas. So I wish we had that lead in going to that. It would have been even a greater conversation, maybe a little trash talking if you both are Longhorn fans. But, we'll just keep it rolling with the ag, right?
Yeah, I have a feeling it would have gone a lot better for you than it would have for us, but I see where you're coming from.
You sound like a smart man, you go Tigers, right? No, it's great. I'm here at LSU. I work in the AgCenter. I run a beginning farmer training program. I'm wrapping up my PhD. I'm a football fan. Did I mention that I was a football fan? The Saints play tonight. It's all great here in South Louisiana. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the day.
But are you a football fan?
A little bit. I think I watch it maybe like once a day, whether it's like a game or ESPN or whatever the case is. I try to get just a little bit in to keep my day rolling.
So let me ask you real quick. How do you feel about them being back, really? Is it like, I'm so glad I get to watch football, or, okay, well, here they are. I guess I'll go ahead and watch it.
It depends on what hat I put on. As my college football fan hat, I'm excited about it, particularly for SEC football, the greatest football in the country. And for a while, I did some work with the football team here. I helped to run a couple of their morning study halls. So I'm excited to see the young men that I work with get back on the field and, kind of run through the rest of the SEC and anybody else that gets in their way. But at a certain point, it's like there's just so much talking about it. Well, maybe they'll play, maybe they won't. And so it's kind of like, you know what? I guess I'll watch. But I need a little bit more excitement about that than, just that level of it, right?
Fair enough.
So not to interrupt the football talk, but I did actually invite Marcus here to talk about agriculture.
No, certainly. Ag is my passion. I grew up in rural Northeast Louisiana. Tensas Parish in the Mississippi Delta. Tensas, Madison, and East Carroll parishes here in Louisiana are probably recognized as the three poorest parishes in the state. But those three parishes are dominated by agricultural production of commodities crops. So we grow a lot of corn, soybeans, and cotton in that corner of the state. And so agriculture is what I saw growing up. In fact, I was up in that corner of the state this weekend. They're getting ready for cotton production. And I was joking with some friends that there's no greater smell in the air than defoliation chemicals of being sprayed on cotton and prepared for production. So I still kind of had that scent in my nose from the weekend trip. But, that kind of reminded me of my childhood. The other part of it, why I'm interested in doing farmer access and food access work was because, growing up in that environment of the state, I saw big ag. I saw large commodities production. And I didn't, with my background and who I was, I didn't have access to land. I didn't have access to those capital resources to engage in agriculture at that level of production. And so throughout my career, I've looked for ways to get everybody or provide opportunities for everybody to be engaged in agriculture. And so agriculture in the food system. And so whether it's somebody growing on 1/8 of an acre to somebody growing 100 acres to sell direct at a farmer's market or a CSA or sell direct to a grocery store. Those are the things that I'm interested in. And those are things that I saw a hole in my community growing up. So it's exciting to be able to do this work now.
So how did you get to doing this work? It sounds like you grew up in a rural area, but did you grow up on a farm?
No, it all started at a football stadium. No, I'm joking.
Really?
So I grew up in a small rural town. I didn't grow up on a farm, but there was a cotton field 50 yards down the street from my house. And so, anybody familiar with, rural towns and rural communities know that you either live in town or out in the country, right? I lived in the town. And so agriculture was just something that I was around. I'm between old enough before we became a totally mechanized in agriculture where kids that grew up with me still, had summer jobs chopping cotton and making $200 a week and use that money, throughout the summer, collect that money throughout the summer to buy their school clothes. And so I had an introduction to production agriculture, ever since I was a small child. But seeing that kind of level of hard work, sweating under the hot sun, let me know that, production agriculture may not have been the thing for me. So that's why I decided to get into the educational side of it.
So you run the Grow Louisiana program, right?
Yes, I'm the program director, correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about that program?
So the Grow Louisiana Beginning Farmer Training Program is an extension program. It's funded by the USDA Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. We're coming up on the third year of this project, but we focus on horticulture and specialty crops. And so, growing fruits and vegetables or microgreens or, other products that, primarily for market farmers or market gardeners, people can sell at farmers markets. It's been our clientele, if you will, that we work with. But the program, we focus all the way from the technical aspects of production all the way to business development and business training. One of my key things that I'm interested in is when we're working with farmers and we're working with farmers that are interested in selling more direct to consumer, is making sure that you're treating your farming operation like a business. And so when folks come through our program, we try to make sure that they have a business plan, a marketing plan, be able to think through those processes just like if they were developing any other business, put that same amount of effort and fortitude and thought process into developing your farm business. And so we've had a cohort down in New Orleans. Our first cohort was in New Orleans in 2019. This year we moved over to Lafayette, Louisiana, and we're getting ready to kick off a cohort here in Baton Rouge. And, our folks that, we work with, people that, have no farming experience to folks that come in with, some experience working on a farm somewhere. And so our message to them is very simple. Whether you have 0.1 or an eighth of an acre up to 50 acres, we can transform you into a productive farmer in this food system. So
earlier you were talking about working with students in some capacity with your job at the university, but this sounds like you work with farmers in the community. So you just do a little bit of everything, it sounds like?
Man, you know what? I'm a jack of all trades.
There you go. So
this particular program is an extension program. So it focuses on folks out in the community. In our first two cohorts, we had 18 people in each one of those cohorts. And those, the only requirement is that you be a new and beginning farmer, meaning that you have no experience or you have less than 10 experience in farming. And you can put together a compelling enough story to convince us why you're going to be a successful farmer. And all of those folks come from or out in the community. But also, I'm also on the faculty at Southern University, which is an 1890 land grant here where I teach agricultural marketing. So I wear several different hats.
Got it. You also said something about 0.1 acres, which doesn't sound like a whole lot of land. What do you tell someone with 0.1 acres to do?
When you're growing that small, it's typically high turnover, high labor intensive crops. And so, for example, I'll use an eighth of an acre as an example. We have some folks that are growing on an eighth of an acre down in New Orleans and have significant revenue potential with what they're doing. But they grow specialty crops and it's high turnover. So they grow in microgreens and things like that. So once they, whether it's a 2 or 3 week turnaround, when they pull one crop out of the field, they're immediately putting another crop back in the field. So it's highly labor intensive, but it's all about understanding what you can do, but also understand what your market demands. And so usually with that small of an acreage, to be successful is using some crop that's a high turnover, consistent rotation and things going in the field. And folks have been good at that. You're with that type of scale, you're not going to go sell at your local grocery chain, likely. But you can set up shop at the local farmers market, and folks have been very successful at doing that.
I'm curious what kind of folks you have coming through your program. Like, is there any common denominator that you see, usually they're this kind of person with this kind of background or anything like that?
The number one thing that I get from our participants is they are interested in providing healthy and sustainable food to their local communities. Whether that's someone that has experience or have not had experience, that's usually the common denominator. What we have found, so for example, with our Baton Rouge cohort, the majority of the people, I'd say 75% of the people that applied to be in the program had zero farming experience. They come from zero farming background. They don't have a degree in agriculture, but they understand the food system and they want to be involved in the food system and they want to grow food to service their community. That's the level of demand right now that I'm seeing here in this particular, in the southeast region of Louisiana. But in that other 25% that's referenced in that cohort, some have been farm workers and worked on small scale operations, whether it's fruit, vegetables, or other different type of crops. So they have some experience. We have some folks that have access to land and want to figure out what to do with their land, but need some better direction as to what to do with the 10 acres of land that grandma left them. And so we try to help those folks put together a plan of action to do something productive with that land. We also try to partner folks. And so if there are people in the program that have zero experience, and let's say that they live in an apartment, they don't immediately have access to land. Well, how about we partner you with someone else in the cohort so you can get the experience that you need, but also that person that has the land can get the help that they need to develop the land. And so, farmer networking is big. The cohort model that we use of bringing everybody together as one has worked really well for us. And they end up training each other and providing opportunities to one another. So that's been really exciting.
That's fantastic. Yeah, one of the things I've definitely learned in the past, I don't know, even just a year or two, is that networking is one of your most important assets. You mentioned sustainability, and I think one of the things that really amuses Hallie is when I actually remember things that we talked about in the past. And one of the things that we've talked about is sustainability is one of those words that can mean a lot of things to different people. So when someone says they want to farm sustainably, what does that mean to you, or what do you try to teach them to do that?
We use a three-pronged approach, if you will. First, developing a sustainable business. And when I say sustainable business practice, I mean something that's going to be around for the long term. Which means developing goals and objectives about where you want to be in 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 years as a business. We try to spend time talking about that. From a soil management perspective, how are you being a good steward of the land that you manage or the land that you own? Good soil management practices can help with the overall efficiency of your crop. So talking about that, that can be no-till to minimal till to proper cover cropping to proper fertilization. All of those things go into play when you're talking about good soil management. And then when we talk about production management, making sure that they understand it, particularly from a production standpoint, are you being a good steward of the environment? So if you're producing crops, are you using things like pesticides? And if you are they organic pesticides? And if you're using synthetic pesticides, how do you properly apply those things to be a good steward of the environment with your production management practices? And so for me, and it's something that for me has been evolving over time as I've talked to different people and I've learned more from a community perspective of what they mean or what they want in sustainable agricultural practices. And so we try to be very broad-based in when we talk to folks. But what I tell our participants and what I tell the folks in the community when we talk to them is that sustainability is something that, like you said, it has different meanings for different people. But if I'm the producer, what matters to me with my end crop is what my consumer deems to be sustainable. And so we try to use, business, soil and production management, but also understanding the consumer as a means of defining sustainability for each one of our participants individually, because that sustainability plan differs by person.
Do you find that once people get started, they tend to stick around for a while?
Some. We've in our first cohort, we've had some people that realize that agriculture and farming is hard work.
Oh boy!
I guess they thought that they could just go kind of hang out under a tree and sip lemonade and live their life, right? But you got to do a little sweating, right? That's involved, and so seeing that allowed us to change how we taught in our program, to talk more about the realities of farming, and what farming and agriculture really look like, and the amount of work and labor that goes into being productive. We've talked more about that up front to folks. Since COVID has happened, we've seen an increase and there was a Gallup poll that came out a few weeks ago that talked about how interest in agriculture and food system has increased over the past several months. But inherent in that increase is a full lack of understanding of what actually goes into agriculture. So we make a pointed effort to talk about what the realities are in farming. And that's actually led us to put together a quick webinar series talking about the realities of farming. So, folks say that they're interested, but if you're interested, I don't necessarily want to chop your interest per se, but I want you to understand what it is that you're interested in. And so that's been the one, I think, barrier for folks in leaving or not being successful once they leave a program like this, because they get a full understanding of what's required of them.
What are the other barriers you see to people who want to start farming, to people who don't have much farming experience? And, how do you get started? What are the things standing in your way?
From a business standpoint, two things you often hear. One, access to land, and two, access to capital resources, whether that's loans and things to buy the equipment that's necessary. That's often a barrier. A good starting point for people, I tell you, if you have access to land, whether it's, a small backyard where you can start off with a small backyard garden, just get started. I've spent probably the last year and a half traveling around to different meetings and conferences around the country where I've been able to engage with farmers. And that's oftentimes the thing that they say, just get started. And so if you have a small backyard where you can, to start off in five big pots where you just starting to grow, the process of growing, start there. I mean, just get your fingers in the soil. And as you begin to perfect your trade, that's when you can begin to look at how to go into other areas. Do I need to get more land? Is this even for me? Understanding what programs are available. Do I need to build a relationship with the land bank? Do I need to build a relationship with the local bank, or try and figure out what programs the USDA has to offer? But just get started. If you had asked me, say, 15 years ago, if somebody growing on an eighth of an acre can bring in, or even a half an acre could bring in half an acre and can bring in $100,000 of revenue in a year from growing on that half an acre, I would have looked at you and laughed. Because I come from a community and a background where if you weren't growing several hundred acres, that's not a farm, right? But by engagement with farmers, I'm learning that, you start with what you have. I mean, there was a story, a farmer that I met in North Carolina who started out with half an acre and eventually, rented and acquired up to, I think it was like 10 acres. And I think he grew to having 80 acres, finally within North Carolina. But that was a 10 to 15 year process of growing it. He was in construction, so his background was construction. So he was construction full time and farming part time. As he became better at the farming side of it, he eventually walked away from the construction side of it and went into farming full time. But it was a process of him learning the craft and the trade and the skill of farming in order to perfect what he was doing. And then he scaled up as he could manage it more. And I think that fellow, he eventually, as recent as last year, was buying a plot of land in the Dominican Republic and was going to grow avocados or something like that in the Dominican and import them back in the United States himself. That brother had a plan, right, to do that. And his background was no different than anybody else who may be interested in agriculture. He just had the will to get started with what he had.
I'm sorry, and keep in mind that I really know nothing about the economics of agriculture, but did you say $100,000 on half an acre?
Half an acre.
Wow.
High rotational vegetables and specialty crops. Now, there's revenue. We're not talking about profitability.
Got it.
So
Okay.
a whole different ballgame, right?
Sure.
But just the amount of money coming in. And you also have to think about it, too. When a farmer is selling direct at a farmer's market, you can often charge a higher price than you would selling at a retail setting like a grocery store.
Yep.
And also, depending on the farmer's market that you have, you may have a higher income clientele who are willing to pay a higher price point for that more locally produced goods, those more locally produced goods. And so it just depends on the market setting. But there's one farm that I work with here locally that makes about $100,000 in revenue from their operations a year. And that was like in their first or second year starting up.
Nice.
So it's when you think about it, but also, they are there day in and day out farming. If we get bad weather, we get a hailstorm that comes in and damages their crop, they immediately have to flip that crop, put another crop in the ground so they can consistently have that revenue coming in. And so, the closest thing that you can associate farming and agriculture to is gambling.
Wow.
Because you're putting something in the ground and you don't know what you're going to get back, right?
Well, that's for sure.
So, no, it's been an interesting process. I'm teaching some of these things, but I'm more so learning from these things because since I've been engaged in this area for, say, the past 2.5 years, it's changed how I've taught even my undergraduate level college courses and talk more about the direct method. So it's been pretty cool. I'm the student again, right?
Well, are the people you're working with, are they all coming to you, or are you also trying to recruit people?
So the first cohort, they came. We put a call out for applications, and they came to us. With this last cohort, we put out. We put a call out, but we were more specific in recruiting people. And so working with our local extension agents to say, hey, do you have anybody who's interested in farming who may need training? Or just you looking at our community partners and our community organizations that are doing local food system work and providing them some technical assistance to assist in training the farmers, the small scale and new and beginning farmers that they may be working with. It's about building those relationships in the community. For me, that's been the fun part.
Welcome to the break.
Hello.
Hello.
I would like to encourage all of our listeners today or tomorrow, I guess if you're listening to this tomorrow, but as soon as possible, to go online and double check your voter registration. There are a lot of reasons why you might have become unregistered, or perhaps you've moved and you've got to update your voter registration.
Or maybe somehow you just mysteriously fell off the voter rolls.
There's a lot of things that happen by mistake or on purpose where people get removed from voter rolls. So I highly recommend that you go online and you double check because most voter registration deadlines are coming up soon. And in some places, early voting is going to be opening soon. And so I highly, highly recommend everyone to vote early. Vote as early as you can. Vote with a friend. Create a voting plan. Let's vote.
VOTE. Make life good for bumblebees. Vote. Vote.
That was amazing, Dad. That was so good.
I don't know if voting actually improves the lives of bumblebees, but I mean, you can't improve the lives of bumblebees without voting, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Other than by planting native flowers for pollinators, which you should also do as well as voting. But let's do both.
Do you know who I bet will vote for sure?
And who will plant flowers for pollinators?
We hope. Is our patrons, especially our starfruit patrons, Vikram, Lindsay, Mama Casey, Patrick, and Cheyenne.
And
Cheyenne. Thank you so much for supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. And thank you for voting. Back to the episode.
Back to the episode. I'm curious, if you go to a party and you talk to folks who don't know anything about agriculture, how do you explain the importance of your work with new and beginning farmers?
At the end of the day, the most important thing is, at the end of the day, you got to eat, right? And what you eat, how you eat, and how much you eat comes from different shapes, sizes, and forms of farming. But from an economic development standpoint, farming is can be just as lucrative as anything else that anybody wants to get involved with. And so if I'm talking to people about farming and people are looking for an opportunity to run a successful business, that's how I'm just looking at it from a farming standpoint. Because at the end of the day, farming is one of the only businesses or industries in the world where you have a consistent denominator at the end of the tunnel, is that people have got to eat, and that's not going to change. And so as long as there's mouths to be fed, there's opportunities for people to engage in farming.
I love that.
And I like to eat too. So, they can grow and farm and grow stuff and I'll come buy it from them. So, there's always a consumer base, and I'll be the first consumer, right?
It's one of life's great pleasures, that's for sure.
No, and it's something with the thing. Farming can also be like an art, right? If let's say you're a small scale farmer, let's say you're growing tomatoes and various varieties of tomatoes, some peppers, some different varieties of microgreens and lettuces and things like that. And so you take those very small seeds and you put them in a transplant, you put the transplant in the ground, and you grow those transplants or those seedlings out to a product that a person can eat. When you take that product to the marketplace, you're selling direct, say, at a farmer's market, and you've established this relationship with your consumer, you now get to tell the consumer or the customer the story about that lettuce and that tomato that they bought from you, that they're going to put in a salad on their table later today. You get to tell that customer the story about the food that they were eating. That's an opportunity that you don't get when you go to the grocery store. And so that's one area of benefit from small scale farming, is that, if you're selling direct and you're that hands-on with your production process, you get to meet and talk to your customer and tell them the story of the food that they're eating. That's an art in itself, right?
This is the same thing I've heard. We did a series on local food, and we heard that as a benefit for the customer. And Hallie, you've talked about this before, where you go to a farmer's market and you can just ask the farmer what their growing practices are. And this is the first time I've heard it as a benefit from the farmer's side as well, about how you get to do this and you get to tell your story of how you created this thing.
No, if you pay attention to, say, Apple, when Apple puts out a new iPhone and the guy gets on the stage and tells this whole story about how nice and all the features that this iPod, this new iPhone or Apple Watch or whatever product they have coming out, they get on the stage and they tell a story to entice the consumer to buy the product, but they feel good about the story that they're telling. Well, that's no different in farming. When you tell the story, it's gratifying to know that someone cares about what it is that you do. And that's a level of satisfaction that most farmers that sell at farmers markets, they get that, and they enjoy that engagement with their customers.
I do, in fact, watch those videos.
See, you know what I'm talking about, right?
True.
You probably got like the iPhone 15, just like waiting on deck to order, right?
That's true too. Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about specialty crops, and I mean, I'm from Texas. I don't know that much about Louisiana, but is that something that has historically been grown in your area, or is that changing now?
I would say there's an opportunity here. Depending on what corner of the state you're from, we've been a commodities heavy state. We do have some folks that are growing fruits and vegetables here in the state, but we're probably behind the 8 ball on other states. And there's various reasons for that. If you grew up in the northeast corner of the state, like me, you knew cotton, corn, soybeans, sorghum, and a few other things. If you're going southeast, south central, you're looking at sugar cane. If you're southwest, you're looking at rice production, crawfish production. But there's opportunity here to grow other things, and there's a market potential and market demand for a lot of these crops. And so if you look at a lot of your traditional farmers in the state, they're very set on the crops that they want to grow. They're not interested in growing a lot of these other crops, like the various kinds of specialty crops. And so that provides an opportunity for new and beginning folks to engage, because there's a marketplace. Not only is there a marketplace at farmers markets and the development of CSA models to sell direct to consumers, but grocery chains, more localized grocery chains, are looking for food that was grown closer to the consumer, because it's a marketing tool for them. They can put this locally grown, say, cucumber in their store with the picture of the farmer that came from 20 miles down the road, and that's perfect marketing for them. And so there are just many opportunities within the state in Louisiana for specialty crops. And the marketplace in New Orleans is caught on a lot quicker than other areas of the state. In New Orleans as a city is a salad in itself. I wouldn't say a melting pot, it's a salad, because there's many different people that are mixed into the city, and they each bring their own value individually to make the city great. And they've caught into the local foods movement more quickly than other areas of the state. And so now we're seeing some of that level of demand for local foods expand to other areas of the state. Problem is, we got to have people to supply that demand for those products. And so that's why programs like this are important. And that's why a lot of the work now that I'm doing as a complement to our training program is to show that there is, one, demand for more locally grown foods, and two, that there's opportunities, economic development opportunities in agriculture for the production of specialty crops.
So what are you excited about right now in food systems and agriculture?
I'm just excited to be able to provide people an opportunity to engage in something that I'm passionate about. Somebody provided me an opportunity to do what it is that I love to do. And so if there are people passionate about getting engaged in farming and the food system, I'm excited to be able to provide them an opportunity from an extension standpoint and from a traditional agriculture standpoint. A lot of these folks the folks that are now interested in these areas don't look like our traditional folks that come from rural towns and grew up on a farm. They're just everyday folk that are just looking to make their communities better. If we can provide them an opportunity to do those things and to be successful in those things, let's do it. And I'm just excited to be right there in the game alongside of them and helping to push them along to make them successful.
I think this is, of any of our episodes, this is the most where I've heard where, in a lot of ways, agriculture is just so much about the people that are involved and that are in there doing it. It is. And that's something that I've had to learn over time, because from a production standpoint, but also from a retailing standpoint, you're just so used to, large scale farms, and you're used to just being able to the grocery store and just get whatever you need and not really have that connection. But when you think about agriculture at its core and most things that we do, whether it's our families, whether it's our friends or whoever, when we come together around food, right? So food is like this great come together thing, right? It's like this great glue that brings people together. Here in South Louisiana, from about March to July, we're real big on crawfish. So we have crawfish boils pre-COVID, right? We would have these big crawfish boils in our backyard and invite, 20, 30 of our family and friends over. We just come together, eat crawfish, bring some cold ones, and have a good time in the backyard. So food has always served as this come together role for people. And now with, everything that's happening with local foods, the expansion of farmers markets in different areas, it's bringing people together again, and it's allowing people to have conversations that they wouldn't have had before, particularly around the food that they're eating and where it came from. And so that level of people wanting to know about their food is we haven't had that in decades, right? I mean, you talk to kids now,
and you ask them where eggs come from, they tell you Walmart.
It says Walmart chickens.
Walmart chickens, it's all in that back warehouse of the store. You just can't see them. Definitely those Walmart chickens.
Right, yeah. I don't think those are cage free.
No. They're more like 22 a box kind of
right.
Well, Marcus, thank you so much for taking the time today and joining us on the show. Is there anything that you want to leave listeners with, or anywhere that you'd like to point anyone who's interested in learning more about you and your work?
So for anybody that's interested in farming, in agriculture, and getting engaged in the food system, I'd say just get started, right? You don't need a degree to grow things. If you have a balcony, if you have a backyard, just start off with a pot and try and grow something. Go to a local Walmart or a local seed store or a local nursery in your community and see what the seeds they have available, and just start growing something. Just start getting your fingers in the soil and becoming one with the soil, and seeing if that is truly something you enjoy. You can't win the football game unless you kick off. You kick it off at the beginning of the football game, right? And so your kickoff into agriculture and the food system is just to start growing stuff. Once you do that, you can figure out the rest. The USDA has a number of resources for new and beginning farmers that you can check out. There are also many nonprofit organizations in different areas that support people, new and beginning farmers, to get into agriculture and the food system. And so just get started. Don't waste time. Just do it. Like Nike, just do it. And see if it's definitely for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No, this has been great. And thank you for having me for this conversation.
Thank you, Marcus. And hook 'em horns.
Go Tigers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One to Grow On.
This show is made by me, Hallie Casey, and Chris Casey. Our music is Something Elated by Broke for Free.
If you'd like to connect with us, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at onetogrowonpod, or join our Discord and Facebook communities and leave us your thoughts on this episode.
You can find all of our episodes and transcripts, as well as information about the team and the show, on our website, onetogrowonpod.com.
Help us take root and grow organically by recommending the show to your friends, or consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/onetogrowonpod. There, you can get access to audio extras, fascinating follow-ups, exclusive bonus content, and boxes of our favorite goodies.
If you like the show, please share it with a friend. Sharing is the best way to help us reach more ears.
Be sure to see what's sprouting in 2 weeks.
But until then, keep on growing.